It's not quite the future yet, man. We'll do another run. Take 2.
In the GRIMDARK now.
Okay, things are pretty grim and dark now, but it's earlier again.
In the GRIMDARK 70s.
Jesus Christ, I'll do it myself. We're doing Trench Crusade. Trench Crusade has made the biggest splash in Wargame probably out of any hobby company ever. So big that even before the Kickstarter finished, there were already community talking points of, are they going to be the ones to take down GW? Initially, they released SCL so the 3D models could be printed. They also highly encouraged kit bashing and proxies, showing us hobbyists that there still are a few companies out there that are willing to foster the idea of creativity in wargaming. And now they're taking another huge step in releasing the first official plastic kit, the Prussian Strossthruppen. The Prussians. The Feldkaplan pose is pretty dope, but those big ass arms are getting in the way of all those chest details, and this is one of the few times I used forethought and left it in a sub-assembly. To be completely honest, this is a completely unnecessary step. I threw down a Zenithal highlight just so you could see all the details from a new model, and if it wasn't for that fact, this would just be a flat black prime. In saying that, I really like the Turnbull Turquoise speed paint. I did thin it down a little bit just so it wasn't quite as strong, but it is a nice place to start from, somewhere that's still dark but it's not a true black. And the big bonus here is speed paint doing what speed paint does. It's going to darken down all those recesses while still contrasting the higher points, which is kind of like a cheat code for where to put the highlights. And even though you may only see one piece, I'm going to repeat the same steps on everything. But first we're going to check out what paints we need for this Bithmas colour scheme. This is a fairly wild gradient. If we put an orange in here, we could run this in a full circle, but because we don't, we're going to fade in and out almost like a mirrored pattern. The idea that we have to go up and back with this colour scheme instead of doing a complete wraparound with colour adds this really weird step of interest. We've done a bunch of rainbow schemes on the channel, and to be completely honest, they all kind of look the same. At least in the sense where it can be completed as an endless loop. But taking one colour out of the sequence means we have to change direction, and changing direction gives us a whole bunch of new opportunities. If you've seen any other rainbow scheme that we've done on the channel, you know that we generally start with pink from one top corner and move down diagonally. But now, since we have a gradient that's essentially turned into a pattern that's changing directions, we don't only have to go from top to bottom or, diagonally across, we can actually change direction mid-sequence. A similar idea to a holographic pearlescent. As far as physically painting in all of these details, I'm really only going to show you the placement. Off camera, there was a lot of blending back and forth and additional layers just to bring up the opacity and the vibrancy of each colour. Especially with the greens and yellows, just because they are so light and vibrant on a very dark flat surface. Painting lighter colours on top of a darker surface, especially black, can suck out a lot of the saturation, so you do generally need a few more layers just to punch it up a touch. And while we're busting out some behind the scenes truths, while everything did get painted, I really didn't care for the stuff that wasn't going to be seen. It got colour, but it didn't get taken to the same level as everything else. And to be completely honest, this is fine for just about every situation that's not going into a painting competition. As we keep moving on down this scheme, you can see how we've already started to change direction. With schemes like this that is almost more of a pattern than it is a gradient, there are a few things you have to watch out for. One is the distribution of colour. And in this context, that means having the same amount of space for each colour regardless of the physical space that you have to work with. As long as you have even chunks of colour, it doesn't matter if you run out of room before you get to the next section. And the second thing is balance, but we'll talk more about that just a little bit later. We all know that Trench Crusade is the most grimdark of grimdark wargames, but we also kind of knew that I wasn't going to be painting anywhere near this style. Except I kind of did. The idea here was a gritty grimdark with colours. While we're talking about grimdark and colour, I'm going to jump forward to the wings. Typically, trying to grimdark up some colours would be thought about in one way. Add the colour, then add the grimdark. But that instead invokes an image of something being pristine before it became grim. Whereas for this, I wanted a feeling of organic helplessness. An atmosphere or an idea as if it was almost the best that they could do in such a bleak setting. So for the wings themselves, we pulled this off with a Zenithal highlight. And I did go a little bit heavier with the white because we still do want some fairly light feathers. But if I can pat myself on the back for a minute, this is where the pure genius came in. Even though the wings are selling as white, there is a lot of soft transitions into grey before eventually getting to black in the recesses. And as we've spoken about before, whenever you try to put bright, vibrant colours over black, it'll suck a lot of the saturation out. And we're actually going to use that idea as a technique to dull some of the sections from those vibrant colours. As far as actual application goes, this is just straight glazing or tinting. These are the exact same colours that we use on the armour, except they are heavily thinned down. And because they are so thin, they become transparent, which is going to give us a secondary buff. Because these paints are already transparent, by the time you put on a thin layer and then come across with another colour, they are going to blend together naturally. You don't want to go too heavy because you will leave some water staining, but we're going pretty thin as it is. This way, as we start overlapping the different colours, they're all going to start to blend and transition in together and making it look a little bit more natural. And with the black sucking out the vibrancy, we get our Grim Prismatic. Since this is a new kit at the time of recording, let's check out some sprues. To help prevent you from going blind with saturation exposure, we'll check out some grey. This is the first official plastic kit from Trench Crusade. These are being manufactured by Archon Studios, so the same guys that brought you Masters of the Universe, Rampart, Wolfenstein, StarCraft, and I'm pretty sure Conquest. So straight out of the gate, we're already at GW level quality. All the parts are numbered, all the details are crisp, and those little arrows are a lot more useful than you'd think. The quality level that they've got coming out for a first release kit is actually kind of insane. Honestly, 10 out of 10 recommend. Now, originally I wanted to keep the robes dark, but after doing the armor and the wings, there's a lot of color up there, making it seem a little bit top heavy. Like your mum. For the actual physical application of paint, we're going to use a very similar idea as what we did to the wings, but on the robes. So the saturation on top of the black is going to get sucked out harder than a golf ball through a garden hose. But again, we're aiming for organic helplessness, and that kind of pulls it off. And again, we're using the exact same paints as we did for everything else. This is technically a limited palette scheme. As unintended as it may be, it's actually doing a really good job of showing you how much of a difference the undercolors on a paint job can make. And while sometimes it can be a limitation, it's also a great idea to have this in the back pocket and you can pull it out to pull these kinds of effects out. As I mentioned in that little colorway, we were starting to get very color heavy towards the top, especially towards the wings. And to even that out, we had to pull some color down into the robe. And this is what I refer to as balance. The idea works exactly like a seesaw. I'm a 6'2" Polynesian that's only several cheeseburgers away from being a perfect sphere. So if you set me on a seesaw on one end and then on the other side somebody like Zenzaya who's built like an iPhone, we all know whose legs are going to be dangling off the ground. And a similar thing happens with focal points when we're painting models. A focal point is generally something that our eyes are drawn to. Usually it's your light and bright colors. So with something like this that has very light wings and then very vibrant torso armor, our eyes are going to be very quickly drawn away from a dark robe. So all we're really doing by adding a little bit of extra color to the robe is evening out that weight distribution. All it's doing is trying to pull that focus back in towards the middle a little bit more instead of having it spread off in one direction specifically. This isn't the greatest example of pulling everything back, but it is an example nonetheless. This is why glowing eyes on a Space Marine helmet seems to add a lot more pop and dramaticism. It's a big bright punch that our eyes are automatically drawn to. As far as the actual techniques of painting the robe, it's all again the exact same colors. I'm using very, very thin layers of paint to somewhat blend it back in together, and I'm not worried about smoothness. Adding a little bit of painted in choppy texture actually helps sell the effect and the atmosphere that this is a little bit more grim. But other than that, all the highlight ideas are exactly the same as everything else that we've ever done ever. Dark in the recesses and lighter on anything that would actually be facing the light. Alright, let's talk purity seals. This model has quite a few of them, and there's a lot that are pretty damn long. And we're getting fairly close to finishing everything off, so we want to knock them out quickly. Because there's already a lot of colour in here, we can kind of ease back on the saturation. For these purity seals, we're going to use a little bit of wet blending and stippling. Again, just like the roads, we want to go for that somewhat gritty textured look. So the two colours that we're going to pull out here is a base coat of the darkness before moving into Grey Castle. While the darkness is still wet, I'm going to come back with a little bit of Grey Castle and start moving down, somewhat mixing in as we go. All the recesses we're going to leave a little bit darker, and we're going to push more of that Grey Castle towards anywhere that the light would actually be hitting. But as an overall idea, they're going to be brighter on the top than they are on the bottom. And this is where wet blending really helps us out. Between every layer, I'm giving it maybe 30 seconds before coming back in with another load of Grey Castle. And since we want it brighter at the top, I'm always going to start at the top with the fresh grey castle because it'll mix down the further down we go and back into more wet paint. And that puts a bow on it. We all know that GRIMDARK is not my particular area of expertise, but using colours to find a new bullshit way of bringing out an idea kind of is. In a GRIMDARK setting like Trench Crusade, offering a little bit of hope is probably the cruelest thing you can do, which by extension should make this the most GRIMDARK of GRIMDARK models. Check out the description for a full paint list of what we use today, as well as a link to the army painter and a code for a discount. Big love, you filthy heretics.